Greetings, 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 greetings. Self-compassion. I spoke about this recently. Today is debunking some of the myths about self-compassion, which has been very, very important for my already programmed, I know, righteous, stay with the program, I have a plan inner part of myself. So I offer it in jest. And I encourage you today to look at, as I present here for my own awakening, to see how you can relate to some of these myths. I'll go over several of the myths of self-compassion, misconceptions. And these are misconceptions that will stop us from being kinder to ourselves. And hopefully for the rest of our lives, the rest of my life, I'm not going to do that as much. And it's true and clear that most people, certainly if you're listening to this and me, don't have any problem seeing compassion as a thoroughly commendable quality. it is it is absolutely the benchmark, the height of unquestionably good qualities: kindness, mercy, benevolence, tenderness, understanding, empathy, sympathy, feeling with, fellow feeling for another people, along with an impulse to help other bodies, beings, creatures, certainly to help when there's distress. And we seem less sure about self-compassion. Even for me and some others that I witness, it carries a whiff of some of those other less commendable qualities, like self-pity, self-serving, selfishness, self-indulgence, self-centered, and just plain old selfish, which we are very, very scary to think about ourselves in those terms. All the while, we're thinking of ourselves in those terms. So even many generations removed from our origins, even though we're decades ahead, centuries ahead, we're still caught to some degree in believing that if we're not blaming ourselves and punishing ourselves for something, that we risk moral complacency, out of control egotism, or a false pride like that. So take an example of yourself. I watched one of my friends who's very hardworking, top level executive, 2 kids, a great husband, a beautiful family, devoted to family as a spouse, great friend, volunteers, on and on and on. Like you, many of you, like me, and what you have definitely done throughout your lives. And we end up in therapy because our stresses are so high. Tired, worn out, overwhelmed, depressed, unable to sleep, which eventually affects our digestive systems and blood pressures, and then causes us to resent our own families and spouses and husbands and snap at them. So hard on ourselves. And it seldom ever occurs to me, and people like the friend I'm describing, to let up on our own selves, to give ourselves some grace, to take away some of the self-attack, and to give more extended kindnesses and understanding, and to undo the belief systems that's been around for thousands of years, that is not to do that, to continue to do this, is if we're afraid to do it because we'll be seen as weak, lazy, selfish, self-centered, narcissistic, childish, irresponsible, etc. So the other thing about this that was striking to me, that many people in my culture, in our culture, and in my circles have the misgivings about the idea of self-compassion because we don't know what it is or what it looks like, let alone how to practice it. It's also identified self-compassion as a practice of mindfulness, which is as common now as, cornbread and ball games. However, mindfulness has an infinite emphasis on being experientially open, to be aware of our suffering without being caught up in it or swept away by its intensity or adverse reactivities. It leaves out an essential ingredient, however, which for me has been a breakthrough to realize this, and now to spend the rest of my days, the rest of my years, months, weeks, days, hours, whatever I have on this earth, amending this, because it leaves out the essential ingredient of embracing ourselves, embracing the experiencer. So, what distinguishes self-compassion is that it goes beyond accepting our experience as it is, and it adds something more embracing. The experiencer, to embrace ourselves with a tenderness, a warmth, a compassion, especially when our experience is painful. Self-compassion also includes an element of wisdom, the recognition of our common humanity, which I spoke about the last time. This means accepting the fact that along with everyone else on the planet, we are going to experience being flawed, feeling flawed, imperfect as individuals, just like as anyone else, to be hit by the arrows of outrageous but perfectly normal misfortune, nature itself. And although it sounds obvious, it is shocking how easily we forget this, that we fail to remember this and fall into a trap of believing that things are supposed to go well. They better go well, supposed to go well. And that when we have a mistake or make a mistake or have some difficulty come along, that it's something must have gone terribly wrong. Things that shouldn't have happened. Then can leave us feeling more shameful, guilty, isolated, cut off. And it's especially at those times remembering that we are not alone, in fact, and that whatever hardship or struggle that we're deeply embedded in ourselves is also in the human condition. And just remembering this for me and friends, hopefully for you, can make a radical, radical difference. That things that we think shouldn't have happened actually did happen. How do we know they should have happened? They did happen. And taking this should off of it and knowing that this is part of human learning processes, this is part of humanity's awakening, humanity's conscious evolution, that we're not alone in this. Never, ever, ever, under any circumstances. And it isn't just a wishful thinking or another self-help approach or another affirmation. This is an impressive and growing body of research to demonstrate this, that relating to ourselves in a kinder, friendlier manner is essential for our well-being, essential for our emotional well-being, our physical well-being, our psychological well-being, our mental well-being. Not only does it help us avoid inevitable consequences of harsh recrimination, self-judgment, more guilting ourselves, shaming ourselves, which leads to anxiety, stress, depression. It also engenders some resilience, some grit, a more hopeful approach to life. All the research proves that many of the common myths about self-compassion that keep us trapped to some degree in a patterning and even a prison of relentless self-criticism is possible. It's possible to live differently, that these are myths about self-compassion. And I'm offering them today for myself to hear again and for you in an absolute wholehearted prayer for our healing in this and our transformation. So one of the myths is that self-compassion means feeling sorry for myself, feeling sorry for yourself. And that isn't because self-compassion allows us to tune out to the bad stuff. In fact, it makes us more willing to accept, experience, and acknowledge difficult feelings with kindness, a greater level of kindness, which paradoxically helps us process it, and which paradoxically and exponentially helps us let go of it more fully. All the research shows that self-compassionate people are less likely to get swallowed up by self-pity. So, one of the reasons self-compassionate people have better mental health. And the better mental health that we have, the more able we are to be of some earthly good. So, some affirmations or statements to dose ourselves. I try to be understanding. I try to be understanding. I try to be understanding and patient. I am being more understanding and patient toward all the aspects of my personality, even the ones I don't like, even the ones I don't prefer. I'm offering understanding and patience toward all the aspects of myself, all the aspects of my personality, even those that I have formerly disowned. When things are going not so well, when things are going badly for me, I can step back and see that the difficulties I'm in are part of life that the common humanity experiences, that the common humanity goes through things similar to this, and yes, even worse than this. So to gain perspective. And then when something painful happens, I try to take a balanced view of the situation. The people that follow me and hang out with me say, I've learned so much from you, Martha, about the both and. It's both and. Today, someone sent me a note and a request for prayer, and it said, how could it be that the very best day of my life is actually the worst day of my life? And she had had a glorious day that had taken her out to celebrate her birthday, and she had had an illness recently. She was feeling better and like life was back for her. And no sooner than the celebration is over, she got a call that her closest friend had died and had passed over. Joy and grief included. People with higher levels of self-compassion and balance and broader perspective tend to brood less about their misfortunes. We also have a reduced tendency to ruminate, which is why self-compassion then is clearly a contributor to fewer symptoms that tend to lead into anxiety, depression, despair, etc. Another myth is that self-compassion means weakness, which is an allergy for me. So considering myself a pillar of strength, a provider, and fear that when I can't be that, when I'm not as able to cope and show resilience. So when any kind of loss or major life crisis, self-compassion appears to make all the difference in our ability not only to survive what happens, but to still thrive even in it. Grit, resilience. And that stuffing down our feelings and not admitting how much pain we have or how much pain we felt is building a reservoir of that. So it's not weak to show that. It's not weak to speak that. It's not weak to want a witness in that pain. It's the opposite of that. And until we're willing to go through that, the way out is through, then self-compassion stays a missing piece and we're stuck in the pain, stuck in the traumas, stuck in whatever happened to us that we didn't process. The research also shows that people who display and embody more self-compassion have a quicker way psychologically to adjust to the losses, whether it's illness or employment or divorce and things like that. So it's the opposite of being weak, the ability to cope and the ability to find that our power lies in our vulnerability. Another myth is that self-compassion will make me complacent. Like the biggest block to self-compassion is the belief that it'll undermine my motivation. I got to be better, do better. And the idea is that if we don't criticize ourselves and hate ourselves and dictate to ourselves, and especially when we fail, that we're not going to live up to some standard, that we're automatically going to succumb to defeatism or to being a sloth or apathy or just give up. But let's think for a moment how children are motivated. They wouldn't come home one day if they had failed a grade, for example. You don't say, stupid boy. I wouldn't say to her, my little great niece, you're so stupid. You'll never amount to anything. I'm so ashamed of you. Even it makes us cringe to even think about this. However, it's exactly the type of thing we often say to ourselves. And just like it would not motivate a small child, this torrent of shame and guilting, it makes them lose faith in themselves and are more likely to even stop trying, to give up. So then alternatively, a compassionate approach. Oh, honey, of course you'd be upset over this failing grade. Would a hug help? Can I give you a hug? This happens to all of us, honey. It's common. Other people in your class got a failing grade too. And I haven't had a failing grade, but I can say that I know very wise and wonderful people who have had failing grades, and then they figured out a way to how to deal with that. So now let's figure out a way to get your grade up. I know it means a lot to you to have the good grades. I know you're thinking about how to get your report card up, or if you want to, get into a good college. What would help you? How can I support you? And I believe in you. There's an honest recognition of the failure, a sympathy for the unhappiness, for the frustrations, for the disappointments in it, and the encouragement to go beyond it, the encouragement to keep going. So this type of caring response helps us maintain some self-confidence and feel emotionally supported, and to be quicker and quicker and quicker to offer it to ourselves. Another myth is that self-compassion is narcissism. And that's a big key word, standing out in the crowds now and I got to be special and above everyone else. Or So that's a myth. And when we feel like failures, whenever we compare ourselves to those better than us, it's going to lead us deeper and deeper in to pain, or more likely to be apathetic, to resign, to give up. And I simply sum it up with compare equals despair. So, and the desire to see ourselves as better than average is normal. And to keep us feeling that elusive feeling of the high self esteem that can also lead us to downright not so becoming behavior and to do some very extreme kind of things. So, self compassion is different from self esteem, although they're both linked to psychological well being for sure. Self esteem is the positive evaluation of self worth, while self compassion is not a judgment. It's not an evaluation at all. Self compassion is a way of relating to the ever changing landscape of who we are, the ever changing landscape of who we are, with kindness and acceptance, especially when we fail or feel inadequate, less than. So, self compassion, care for the self, kindness to the self. And even in the face of the myths that I will be seen as selfish, I know for my well being, it is critical for me to get back to the magnitude of this gap that I have had in self compassion and to absolutely begin again, day in and day out. And even in the face of the old paradigms and the myths around this, that I am absolutely called and equipped to stop withholding myself, stop withholding from myself the kindness, the compassion, the understanding, the respect, the generosity that I have more quickly given to others. And now it is like an inner work, a deep inner work. So as we care tenderly for ourselves in response to suffering, our heart opens. Compassion engages a greater capacity for love, wisdom, courage, the generosity, all that we want to be. And the nurturing power of this self compassion is demonstrated very conclusively that it is central to our own mental health, physical health, all of our well being. And we've known this for a long time, that being kind to ourselves is not, it is too often believed, a selfish luxury. But it is to exercise this as a sacrament, as a holy practice, an exercise of a gift of the highest responsibility of the care for our mind, body, soul, and spirit. Namaste, and all blessings to you as you continue your journey as and toward greater self-compassion. marthacreek.com to contact me. And if you want an immersive process in this, I'll start a program up in October for 8 months. Get directly in touch with me, and I'll send the information to you. All blessings.